to honor our military and our veterans and your presence here today. Vice President Cheney.
Thank you very much, Congressman Rowe and Lieutenant Governor Hampton, General Chuck Horner, one of the stars of Desert Storm. I know Al Gray's here in the audience someplace too. Al came in, the former Commandant of the Corps. I know there are many others who served. I can't mention them all. But the Ambassador Al-Sabah from Kuwait is here, Reverend Abraham, and most especially all the veterans of the Gulf War who are here today. I'm honored to join you in dedicating this site, a fitting place for remembering a superb achievement of the United States Armed Forces. Congratulations are in order to Scott Stump, and it truly is a remarkable when you see what a Marine's capable of, Scott. I really appreciate it. The Desert Storm Memorial Association is a good organization, and I want to do whatever I can to help support the continuing effort. Getting all the approvals to build on the real estate like this can be a real test of persistence, focus, and discipline. Yet this undertaking couldn't be moving along more steadily if Stormin' Norman himself were leading the charge. To state the obvious, this is a project we can expect to surmount any obstacle because Gulf War veterans know how to get things done. I might say I had the privilege some years ago of attending General Schwarzkopf's funeral up at West Point. He wanted to be buried at West Point where he is, and it was a very moving event commemorating a man who was a very major part of our operation. As it happens, in the early morning of January 16th, 1991, the day combat operations began, I was standing not far from this site. My wife Lynn and I were visiting the Vietnam Veterans Memorial, thinking of that war and of all the service members about to fight another, and knowing, of course, that some of them would not return. When Desert Storm was over, our coalition losses were in the hundreds, with still more wounded. We're here today, and the monument will stand here evermore, above all to honor their valor and their sacrifice. But I wanted to come that morning. This was, the morning that the day that I knew operations would begin that night. And there wasn't anybody else around, just the Vietnam Memorial and all those names on the wall. And I wanted to make sure we got it right this time, that we respected all the sacrifice and turmoil that the wall represented. But those of us who were in positions of responsibility were blessed to have men like Chuck Horner and so many others who had been through the Vietnam process and fought honorably in that war, but who were able to give us great advice as we organized Desert Storm to get it right. Established policies that we deployed as units, we came home as units, stop-loss order, everybody's in until we're over with and we finish it. That gave us the kind of military advice, the best you can get from experienced hands, and my job was made much easier for that, and I wanted to recognize that morning when Lynn and I came down here all by ourselves and said a prayer at the wall, the Vietnam Wall, the Vietnam Memorial. My next stop that morning in 1991 was the White House to review final plans with the Commander-in-Chief. As a naval aviator and veteran of World War II who'd flown in combat off a carrier, the President understood every facet of the operation that was then being set in motion. Drawing on his many other experiences, he had methodically assembled a broad coalition of nations, deploying upwards of 700,000 men and women. He would later describe those under his command as the finest troops any country ever had. And the feeling was mutual. With great affection and respect, all of us today recall one of the finest gentlemen ever to serve as President of the United States, George Bush. It was a lucky day for me when President Bush asked me to join him to leave Congress and become his Secretary of Defense. Serving at the Pentagon, responsible for the well-being of all who wore the uniform, was a higher duty than I ever imagined. I still consider it the honor of a lifetime. The job also put me in the company of other leaders that we remember from that period. I think of Secretary Baker, State Department, General Brent Scowcroft, our National Security Advisor, General Colin Powell, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs, and of course Norman Schwarzkopf himself. We worked as well together in those years as any such team ever has, and that too was a credit to the quality of leadership we all received from our Commander-in-Chief. Desert Storm was so swift and certain in result that to some in retrospect, it looked almost easy. Of course, no one says that who was there actually involved. The enemy was ruthless and possessed a sizable army. The regime had used chemical weapons against civilians, completely overrun a neighboring country, and during the war, repeatedly attacked Israel, which was not even a party to the conflict. Our forces had to prepare for some very unpleasant contingencies. It took considerable military planning of great complexity. And as always in a shooting war, success depended on many things going right that could also have gone the other way. For all the risk involved, it was a vital mission, accepted for the best of reasons. When lines are drawn in matters of defense and foreign policy, when clear principles are laid down at the outset, they have to be defended, or else all kinds of trouble will follow. Here, a dictator thought he could seize a neighboring country and get away with it. We had to show him that the world doesn't work that way anymore. And we did. Just as the two memorials will be near to one another, Desert Storm and the Vietnam War were close enough in time for many in the officer corps to be veterans of both. Leading an all-volunteer force, our commanders built a strategy and a campaign based on some crucial lessons that were learned in Southeast Asia, as they had a commander-in-chief who understood those lessons of that era as well. I might add that as a country, we got another thing right in 1991, in a spirit I'm happy to say has never left us since. Our troops were welcomed home with the gratitude and the respect they had earned. For my part, as Secretary of Defense, I remembered another big debt after the Gulf War. So I placed a phone call to Los Angeles to thank former President Ronald Reagan for leaving us a force so dominant, so well equipped, so well prepared to fight and win a war. This memorial, when the work is done, will complete the picture of Desert Storm as we rightly remember it, capturing the pride we should always feel. Like every such monument, it will draw our thoughts to the men and women who wear the uniform of this country, and to those who served and made the ultimate sacrifice. 28 years ago, as in conflicts before and since, we asked much of them, and we got even more. And in honoring them, we are honoring the very best in America.